Dreams don't die from failure, they die while you're waiting to be ready. And you've been waiting for a long time. Too long. The worst part isn't that you haven't moved. The worst part is that you know exactly why you're still standing here. And you're still standing here anyway. You know exactly what you need to do. That's not the problem. The problem is you've known it for 3 years. You have a plan. You have reasons. You've had moments where you were so close you could almost touch the outcome. And then something shifts inside, quietly, almost invisibly, and you take a step back. You'll wait a little longer. One more thing needs to fall into place, and tomorrow looks exactly like yesterday. This isn't a story about laziness. Lazy people are comfortable. You're not comfortable. You're tense. That distinction matters. Because tension means part of you knows the time is slipping away, that the clock is running, that what you're waiting for isn't coming on its own. But the other part, the stronger part, the one that actually makes decision, is still waiting. Waiting to feel certain, and certainty is something you'll never find. Look at how this plays out in practice. A man who's wanted to start his own business for years. Every year the plan gets better, more detailed, more refined. Every year there's a new reason why it's not the right time yet. The market is unstable, the kids are young, he needs to save a little more, learn a little more, and every year, somewhere deep down, a feeling grows that never makes it to the surface. But it's there. Quiet, persistent, accurate. You know that feeling. Or a woman who's wanted to leave a relationship that no longer sustains her for years. She knows it. Her body knows it before her mind does. But every time she gets close to a decision, a question appears. What if I'm wrong? What if this is good enough? What if it's no better on the other side? So she stays. Not out of love, out of uncertainty. Waiting doesn't feel like fear, it feels like reason. That's what makes it so hard to recognize, because while you're waiting, you have arguments. Good arguments. Arguments you can explain to others and to yourself. Arguments that sound mature, responsible, considered. From the outside, nobody sees the paralysis. They see someone who's thinking things through. From the inside, you know you've been thinking too long. Kahneman and Amos Tversky spent years studying how people make decisions under uncertainty. In 1979, they discovered something deceptively simple. The possibility of loss feels roughly twice as powerful as the possibility of an equivalent gain. It's not logic. It's not reason. It's not careful analysis. It's just the fear of the wrong step, which is always louder than the pull of the right one. And while you wait for a certainty that never comes, that fear does its work. Quietly, relentlessly, precisely. It doesn't tell you don't go, it tells you not yet. And the right moment, of course, never arrives. Paralysis doesn't arrive all at once. You don't wake up one morning and tell yourself, "Today I'm not going to do anything. Today I'll wait." The mechanism is subtler than that. So subtle that for years you don't recognize it as a problem. You recognize it as character, as the part of you that is careful, thorough, responsible. But what it actually is a self-perpetuating system. Here's how it works. You have an idea, a vision, something you feel you need to do. In the first moment, the energy is there, the clarity is there. You can almost see what it looks like on the other side. And then within hours or days, a process begins that you call thinking. But it isn't thinking. It's searching for objections, not consciously, never consciously. Your brain does it automatically beneath the surface while you believe you're analyzing the situation. Every argument for immediately gets a counter-argument. Every possibility immediately gets a risk attached to it. Every step forward immediately gets the question, but what if it's not good enough? And that's the core of the mechanism. You're not looking for reasons to act. You're looking for proof that acting won't fail. And that proof, in an inherently uncertain life, is never sufficient. There's always one more variable, one more scenario you haven't worked through, one more thing you can't control. So you wait. And in that waiting, something important happens. The idea begins to lose its luster. It doesn't disappear, and that would be easier. It just becomes less alive, less urgent, less real. And you start thinking maybe it wasn't that good to begin with. Maybe you were being naive. Maybe this is good enough. That's not wisdom. That's a mechanism protecting itself from being tested. Because as long as you don't test the idea, it's still perfect, still possible, still yours. The moment you move, it becomes real, and real things can fail. Perfect ideas inside your head never do. Waiting isn't a pause between intention and action. Waiting is a strategy for avoiding disappointment. It wasn't modesty that made Franz Kafka ask for his manuscripts to be burned. He asked because he never believed they were good enough. His entire life he wrote with the feeling that something was still missing. One more revision, one more layer, just a little more. Max Brod saw a genius that Kafka deliberately refused to acknowledge in himself. And that's the paradox. The man who created some of the most important works of the 20th century died convinced he wasn't ready. Doesn't that sound familiar? And the longer you wait, the harder it becomes to move. Not easier, harder. Because every day that passes becomes new evidence that you didn't go. And that evidence accumulates. It turns into a story you start telling yourself. The story of a man who has plans but doesn't follow through. Who knows what needs to be done but doesn't do it. And one day that story becomes identity. And identity is the hardest thing to change. There are people who jump. They see an opportunity and they move. Without too much analysis, without guaranteed outcomes, without waiting for everything to fall into place. To some that looks like courage, to others recklessness. But from the inside, it feels like the only natural response to the situation. You are not that person, and you never have been. That's not a weakness, it's not a virtue either, it's how you're wired. The way your mind naturally processes information, assesses risk, measures the distance between current reality and distant possibility. Where others see opportunity, you see variables. Where others feel the energy of the moment, you feel the weight of consequence. Jupiter is alive in you. The vision is vivid, the hunger is real. But Saturn is older and louder. Saturn doesn't ask whether success is possible. Saturn asks what happens if it isn't. It doesn't look toward opportunity. It looks toward the cost of getting it wrong. And while Jupiter opens doors, Saturn stress tests the walls. These two voices are not equally old. Jupiter speaks first. In the moment you see something that ignites you, fast, clear, certain, yes, this, now. And then Saturn takes over the conversation, slowly, methodically, without urgency, and starts asking questions that have no quick answers. Is this the right moment? Do you have everything you need? What if you're wrong? And Jupiter, which was so loud just a moment before, goes quiet. It doesn't disappear. It never disappears, but it waits. It waits for Saturn to finish its review. And Saturn's review has no natural endpoint, because the certainty it's looking for isn't a matter of information, it's a matter of control. And control over outcomes you will never have. And so, between these two voices you live, in the space between desire and guarantee, between what you feel you're capable of and what you can prove is safe. Aristotle wrote about the difference between potentiality and actuality, between what something could be and what it actually is. Potentiality without actuality is nothing more than possibility. Beautiful but unreal. A man who spends his entire life in potentiality, who knows what he's capable of but never crosses into action, isn't a man preserving his worth. He's a man who has traded his life for a rehearsal. There's a pattern in astrology that maps onto a very specific tension between two forces, one that expands, one that contracts, not as a flaw, not as a gift, as architecture, as the way your internal system is built, where every impulse forward automatically triggers a review, where every vision is met by an auditor. In the natal chart, this pattern has a name, Saturn in tense aspect to Jupiter. But set the terminology aside for a moment. Imagine a man with two advisors. The first advisor sees opportunities. He's fast, optimistic, certain. He always has an idea. He always knows the next step. His energy is magnetic, and when you listen to him, everything feels possible. The second advisor sees risks. He's slow, precise, unrelenting. He takes every idea the first advisor brings and dissects it. He demands evidence. He demands guarantees. He demands a track record of successful precedents before he agrees to anything. Now imagine both of those advisors live inside you, and they never reach a common conclusion. This isn't pathology, it isn't a disorder. Millions of people carry this same tension between what they feel capable of and what they're willing to risk. Between the voice that says yes and the voice that asks, "Are you sure?" The only difference is the volume of the second voice and the length of its winning streak. Look at how this plays out on a Tuesday morning. You have a meeting. You've been carrying an idea for weeks. You know it's good. You feel it in your bones. And then, an hour before the meeting, the review begins. Maybe it's not developed enough. Maybe it's not the right moment. Maybe others will have better ideas and yours will come across as amateur. And in the meeting, you say nothing. Not because you have nothing to say, but because the second voice never gave its approval. The idea remains unsaid. Another week, another meeting, another opportunity that passes. Nobody around you knows what just happened. You know. And the hardest part isn't that you stayed silent. The hardest part is knowing you'll stay silent next time too. Because the mechanism that stopped you today wasn't a fluke. It wasn't a bad day. It wasn't the insecurity of the moment. It's a system that runs perfectly inside you. It just doesn't run for you. Leonard Cohen was 33 years old when he released his first album. By the music industry's standards, late, almost too late. But he wasn't waiting because he wasn't ready. He was waiting because he wasn't sure he was good enough. He carried songs for years, obsessively rewriting them, stripping them down, rebuilding them from the bone. A single line could take months to earn its place. When he finally moved, he didn't stop until the day he died. 50 years of music, Lyrics that entered the cultural consciousness of generations. A voice that only got better with age, but nobody knows how many songs died in those notebooks. How many masterpieces he silenced because they failed to meet his impossible standard. There's a kind of loss nobody mourns. It doesn't show up in obituaries. It doesn't come with a date. There's no moment you can point to and say, that's where it happened, that's where something died. You just wake up one day and realize that something that once seemed possible has ceased to be possible. Not because someone said no, but because you stopped asking. The cost of waiting isn't failure. Failure would be easier. Failure has a shape, a moment, a lesson. The cost of waiting is different. It erodes you from the inside slowly while you tell yourself you still have time. Look at what actually gets lost. You lose the energy of the first moment, that raw vitality you feel when an idea is still a living thing. That energy isn't renewable. You can return to the idea a year later. You can reconstruct it rationally. You can develop it better than you did on day one. But that initial charge, when everything was still open, when everything was still possible, that doesn't come back. You lose windows, not opportunities in the abstract sense. Concrete windows, people who were in the right place at the right time. Circumstances that aligned in a way that won't repeat. Moments when something was available that no longer is. Life doesn't repeat itself. Context shifts. And what was possible at 35 may not be possible at 45. Not because you're less capable, but because the window has closed. Then there is the third loss, the quietest and the most expensive. You lose the image of yourself as someone who moves. Every time you stop somewhere deep beneath the surface of consciousness, you etch one more line into the narrative you tell about yourself. Not dramatically, not as a grand decision, just a quiet note. Once again, I didn't go, and that note accumulates. It becomes a belief, and a belief becomes identity, and one day you stop asking whether you should move. You start asking whether you're even that kind of person. The Stoics had a concept, amor fati, love of fate, an acceptance of what is. But it's often misread as passivity, as surrender, as a justification for inaction. Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who ruled the Roman Empire through some of its darkest years, wrote in his Meditations, "Something never meant for an audience." These were the private dispatches of a man wrestling with his own hesitation. A man who had to command himself to rise every morning, not because he was fearless, but because he knew the cost of staying still. Amor fati didn't mean waiting for fate to arrive. It meant walking toward it, knowing the outcome wasn't in your hands, but the step was. The waiting you call caution, that's not amor fati. That's fear dressed up as philosophy. And the cost of that fear isn't only in what you didn't do, it's in what you stopped believing you could. There is no escaping this pattern, not the way self-help books promise a cure, not in the sense that one day you'll wake up and Saturn will be gone. It won't. That voice that measures, that checks, that demands guarantees. It's part of you. It was there from the beginning. It will be there until the end. The question isn't how to silence it. The question is whether you'll keep granting it the power of veto. Clarity isn't optimism. It isn't a decision to suddenly become someone who leaps. It isn't a motivational moment in front of a mirror. Clarity is something colder and more precise than that. The moment you see the mechanism for what it actually is, not as wisdom, not as character, as a system with its own logic, its own history, and its own cost. And when you see it, really see it, you can no longer call it caution. That's the first shift, not in behavior, in naming. Because as long as you call fear caution, it remains shielded. As long as you call waiting wisdom, it remains sacrosanct. But the moment you give it its real name, the moment you tell yourself without drama and without judgment, this is fear of the wrong step, nothing more and nothing less, it loses part of its power. Not all of it, part of it. And that part is enough. There is a difference between a man who waits because he isn't certain and a man who moves knowing he isn't certain. From the outside, that difference is invisible. From the inside, it's everything. Because uncertainty remains in both. No one who has ever made a significant move in life did so with a guaranteed outcome. There was no guarantee for Cohen when he walked into the studio. There was no guarantee for Kafka's manuscripts when Broad refused to burn them. There was no guarantee for Marcus Aurelius, who had to command himself to rise every single morning. Uncertainty isn't a signal that the moment isn't right. Uncertainty is the only medium in which you can ever move. The cards you were dealt, you can't exchange them. You can play them well or poorly. You can play them with courage or with caution. You can wait for the perfect move until the game is over, or you can play with what you have right now in this moment with these cards. There is no guarantee. There never was. That's the only certainty you have left.